Demystified. And the big thing that we're going to be talking about today is that transition period between marketing and moving to business development. So we always say a lot of times people think it's this mysterious thing that takes a million years, and we're going to answer all of those questions today. So let's see if my clicker works.
Ooh,
yes. Okay. So we are going to talk about our why, on why we made this transition, marketing versus business development, identifying mental roadblocks, a reality check, which I think you guys will laugh at, the inside scoop and how we did it, practical steps, and we will end with some case studies.
Alright, so our why. This is actually our why for why we're presenting this to you guys today. We supported each other through both of our transitions, and what we're going to share with you today is what we were hoping someone would share with us when we were making the transition. And so we want to really just lift the veil and share our hearts in with you all, and we don't want anyone to discount yourselves because you don't think that you don't have what it takes to do a job as a business developer.
Okay, so we are going to start with marketing versus business development. Raise your hand in here if you're marketing, so we know. And is there anybody that's just strictly business development? Okay. Kind of half and half. Okay, so marketing is communicating the value of your firm. And we all have to have marketers because...
Did you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because marketing does all of this as well as 70 other slides that we could include with things that marketing professionals do. So some of the things on here are websites, social media, quals packages, emails, interview prep. I mean, we could go on for the next hour about what marketing does. And we have to have all of this. And then I want to define business development. So this is creating the long-term value for your firm by building relationships. And the building relationships part is the most important part for business development. So we have to have all of that marketing collateral, all the materials, the website, the quals package. We have to have those things in order to do our jobs as business development. So some of the things business development does is the relationship building, the one-on-one meetings and getting to know people, maintaining the relationships. So I've had people say, oh, I met that guy 3 years ago at a conference. I have his card somewhere in my desk. Well, that's not a relationship. That's a guy that you met for 5 seconds. You shook his hand, you stuffed his card in your desk. So if that's somebody you do need to get to know, you need to be meeting with them regularly. And really with business development, you're the visible face of the organization. Oh, I put it for you.
That's all right. So we also wanted to address the hybrid role, which is a combination of the two. So that means that you're responsible for marketing and business development. That tends to go along with if you have a smaller firm that you're working for, sometimes they require you to do both. If you have both skill sets and they see that within you.
Are there any hybrid people in here?
Yeah. Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
I want to be just BD, but I'm kind of stuck with marketing.
Okay.
Will you be sharing this slide deck?
Yes, we will. Just a bit of housekeeping since you asked. Our cards are up here on the front, and if you will email either one of us, we'll send you a PDF of this slide deck, okay? So the hybrid role obviously incorporates both marketing and BD that we just touched on. And our personal stance on this is that this is not ideal just because if you're trying to spread yourself too thin and do both, you're not going to be as focused and effective as if you were doing one or the other. It is possible, it just makes it more of a challenge. And Andrea and I, when we talk about business development, we talk about marketing, these are the roles that we're addressing specifically. And we both do the BD side almost exclusively, but we do work with marketing. I do have some oversight responsibilities with the marketing team that we do have, just QCing our submittals and helping them with strategy and things like that. But for the most part, they run autonomously from me. So.
Yep.
All right. Identifying mental roadblocks. So I wanted to include this in our presentation today because this for me was a big deal. When I thought about someone that had a position titled sales or business development, that never was someone that I saw as myself. I would think about someone that looks more like this. Obviously, I don't even come close to looking like this guy. We're not around the same age. We're not the same sex. We're not the same gender, excuse me. And he looks like he could be a model. I'm not a model, sorry. Not made for my looks before. Not to say that it can't happen, but anyhow. And also, I felt like this is what a business developer needs to know how to do, is to play golf and be out there on the golf course and be ready to schmooze with the big dogs, and, right? So, but this frankly just isn't reality.
Is there anybody in here that is modeling on the side or is a professional golfer?
No. I do wish that I played golf, but I don't. And funny story, I actually did get a team together when I first started at Fugro, and we did play a CMAA tournament locally, and I found out really fast that I was really terrible at it, and I wasn't enjoying it at all. So it's okay to be authentically genuine in who you are.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but like be who you are, because you want to sell a true product. You're selling yourself, you're building relationships. So if you are a golfer, that's wonderful. Go out and golf.
Use it to your advantage.
But you kind of think through some other things. I've invited a handful of clients to a driving range. I don't enjoy golfing, but I feel like anybody can go out to the driving range for 30 minutes and then go grab lunch. And so if there's something that you like, definitely offer that to your clients, but it doesn't have to be 4 hours on the golf course.
All right, so this was, again, another perception of being in business development. You're going out drinking all the time, you're out late at night all the time, you're out on the weekends maybe schmoozing clients, you're out at the Cowboys games, which, yes, that can be a nice perk of the job, but it's a very, very small part of what we actually do. And it's not a necessity. I'm really not a big drinker, and I know Andrea is not either. So
that kind of goes on to, again, I've taken people just for a smoothie or a green juice, and they really appreciate it. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad this isn't another happy hour.
Right.
Finally,
right.
We can do something different. So.
Right. And also another thing that I want to address really quickly while we're still in this section is another myth or perception that I had about someone that was in business development was that they were an extrovert, like an extrovert of extroverts, right? So you're always on, you're always the big personality in the room, the life of the party. I don't think that either one of us operate like that. We would consider ourselves introverts, meaning that we recharge by ourselves or maybe one-on-one, but not in a big group of people. So like on the weekends when, I don't have any events on my calendar, I'm not looking for more events to go to because that's not what recharges me. I am quiet. I am at home with my family. So I wanted to address that stereotype as well.
Yeah, a few people have asked my husband and I, like, oh, you guys must have the coolest weekends. And I was like, well, if you consider floating in the pool, reading a book, and if that's what you want to do, that's what I'm doing on the weekend, so I can make it all happen again on Monday. Okay, so we have a reality check. We've kind of been, kind of leaning towards this as we've been describing it, but this is a reality check. Business developers come in all shapes, all sizes. There's men, there's women, there's all different ages, so it's not just the supermodel ex-college athletes doing business development out there. And most importantly, this is what our leadership knows that we're doing on a daily basis. They know that we are out meeting people, shaking hands, making deals, building those relationships to continue bringing in the work. And the inside scoop.
Okay. I'm not sure why this one had your name on it because I've got the next slide, so.
Oh, I have.
Do you have something?
So Lynn had a really great note in her, when we practiced this, and she said, what you focus at, you win at. So I feel like everyone needs to write that down and kind of just start thinking about that through the rest of this.
Okay. So we both mapped out our transition periods, right? Because that's what this whole talk is about. And when I first started thinking about transitioning to, whoops, where did it go?
I don't know. Can we have somebody help us? Oh,
There
it
you
came
go.
back.
Okay.
But now it doesn't want to go. I'll stop this when you push.
Here, why don't I just do this? Nope, that's not working either. Maybe it doesn't like
Can
us
you
both.
just click it on your laptop?
It's not working that way either.
Oh, cool, okay.
Well, we'll make it work. Hang on just a second, you guys.
Great time to grab dessert.
Yeah, if you guys want to go grab some food real quick while we get this fixed.
I'll get dessert first.
So views.
Okay, awesome.
It's working.
So when I first started thinking about making the transition to business development, it felt and seemed overwhelming because I thought, you know, this is going to take me years of time to make this transition from where I am now as essentially a marketing coordinator. And when I was surprised when we both did this map of our journey from marketing to business development, that it's really about a year of time from when I decided that I wanted to make the transition until I had made the transition, right? So
Wow.
I liken this to, you know, if you're in a lot of debt, maybe some of y'all can relate, I've been there. If you're in a lot of debt and you look at trying to climb your way out of that, it can seem really daunting and feel like it's gonna take me 10 to 15 years to get right side up with my finances, right? But the reality is, if you look at the data, most people can be out of debt in 1 to 3 years. So we're talking about a very focused, narrow period of time from once you make that decision until you actually make that transition. And I also want to tag this with, you know, this is true for anything in life, right? Like, right, we're talking marketing to business development, but if you're wanting to make a change in your career, maybe not to business development, but maybe you want to change to some other facet of what you're already doing, start taking those steps, start where you're at and start taking those steps. And, you know, in a year, maybe 2 years max, you'll be in a whole different spot in your life. So I just want to encourage everybody that feels like they're not quite where they want to be, that it's not going to take 15 years to get there. It may take you another year. So just really quickly, I want to walk through this. I have 10 years of professional experience from 1997 to February of 2015. In 2015, though, was a pivotal year for me because that's when I moved to DFW and got back into my career in AEC as essentially a marketing coordinator. My title was Business Development Associate, and that was a fancy word for marketing coordinator. I was doing RFQ submittals, RFP submittals left and right until I couldn't see straight. But prior to this, I've been out of AEC for 14 years. I've had 3 careers in my life. I've been a mom. My youngest child actually has autism, and he's on the more severe end of the spectrum, so I needed to stay home for about 8 years during my career years to give my kids what they needed while they were getting older. I also worked at the local library before we moved here to DFW in Louisiana. And actually, I remembered this morning as I was preparing to come and talk to you guys today that as recently as 2014, I was working part-time at the local library in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I was cleaning houses part-time as well. So I had 2 houses that I cleaned, 2 really large houses that I cleaned every single week because it was good money and the schedule was flexible. So I'm here to tell you that if you don't feel like you can make the career shift, or if you don't feel like you have the confidence or anything like that, that you can. I was cleaning houses 6 years ago, and now I'm doing business development for a national geotechnical engineering firm. So anyhow, back to this really quick. So I started back in 2015, back in my career, started at PSI, which is a competitor of where I am now. I did that for a period of time and then decided, I'm really tired of just doing these submittals left and right, day in, day out, right? Living on constant deadlines. That will stress you out, and it's really not sustainable, frankly. I wanted to do more, and I thought that what I wanted to do was website design and all these other marketing aspirations that I had. I wanted to do these other more creative things and more creative outlets. So I transitioned to another firm, an AE firm here in Fort Worth. I was there for about 6 months because what I learned while I was there was, this isn't for me. I now can do website, I can do all these visionary marketing things, markety things, and I hated it because I missed the pursuit of that next project and that next client. But I also knew that I didn't want to do the submittals all day long, left and right. So the other natural progression was, the other side of that is business development. And so that's really what I decided to do after I returned back to PSI. Just to get my bearings again, they invited me to come back, work again as a senior business development associate. So I was back in the pursuits, mill, if you will, and loving that, but looking for what's my next career move. And then, of course, in February of 2019, a year ago, I just actually had my year anniversary at Fugro. I'm now a BD manager there, so.
Are we allowed to use the clicker?
Yes,
Okay.
I think you can.
Or not? I don't know. Okay.
Yes, you can.
Okay, I'll pick it up again. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of explain how I transitioned through. And so I have 10 years of experience as well. And so right out of college, I actually taught 7th grade English. And I thought, you're out of college, this is what I want to do. I want to be a teacher, maybe a professor. And so I was a teacher for about 3 years. There's a lot of politics in public education. So I was like, this might not be the perfect fit for me. And in the meantime, I have always loved photography. If my dad walked in, he'd have, well, now it's a phone, but he always used to carry a camera everywhere. So I was always with somebody taking pictures. So I thought, this is the perfect time in my life to take a risk and just see what happens. And so I actually had my photography business for about 11 years. And anyone who's owned a small company, they know that it's business development with a side of whatever that is. So, 90% of my job was getting my name out, finding clients, bringing them in, and then that tiny little portion was actually taking the pictures and doing all the fun photography stuff. So I really loved that, learned a lot with that, but the industry was changing, and I knew I needed to get back into the quote-unquote real world. But how would I do that? How do you take owning your own photography business into anything else? So I really kind of sat down with some people, and that's when I learned the word business development. I didn't even know it was a thing. That's just what I had been doing for 10 years. So as you can see, in May of 2015, I came into the AEC industry, and I was the Senior Marketing and Communications Coordinator at Texo. And if you guys are familiar with that, that is, it's kind of like AIA, but for contractors. And so I was working with some really great firms that were members, met some really great people, and I knew that I wanted to do more than just do the marketing things for Texo. So I wanted to get in deeper with an actual client. And so in June of 2016, I took a position with TLC Engineering as a marketing coordinator, and I also was an office manager. So that is probably something a lot of you in here have also dealt with. So you're marketing, you're answering phones, you're making sure there's snacks in the snack room, making sure there's copy paper in the copy machine, all while trying to put together, you know, submittals, RFQs, everything. And so I realized in October of 2016 that a big thing was missing, and that was business development. So I was used to being out and in front of potential clients, and so I wanted to get that back. And that was something that I just mentioned to them. You know, we're doing work, we have repeat clients that we're working with, but no one's leaving the office to build these relationships. And so that's when I was realizing, okay, somebody has to do this. So I was able to start doing a little bit of business development while I was at TLC. And, you know, that's when I kind of started getting out, meeting with clients. And then I found out about RLG Consulting Engineers. And so that's when I moved into an official business development role. One of the big things when I moved to RLG was in the interview, they asked, do you have any deal breakers? And I thought, ooh, this is a good one. You know, like, who asked that? You don't always get asked that question. And my big deal breaker was no more RFQs. So I am strictly business development. And they said, well, that's perfectly fine. We're hiring you to do business development. There'll be someone in marketing to do that, you know, in conjunction with you. So in August of 2018, I was promoted to Director of Business Development, and I absolutely love what I do. I'm only doing business development. Like Lynn, I'm working very closely with my marketing department. We brainstorm a lot, we come up with a lot of ideas together. They have a lot of great ideas that I can start implementing when I'm meeting with clients, things that I didn't think of, or maybe there's some kind of great social media idea that they can think of to help get the name out there. So I work very closely with them, but primarily I'm FaceTime with potential clients. One thing I did want to say is, as you can kind of see all of this, we didn't have all of this planned out on day one. You know, we didn't know that back in 2004, this is where we would end up. So we always emphasize to people, I think there's a lot of us who end up in the AEC world by really strange manners. You know, it's like when you talk to people, how did you end up in this? And you hear this crazy story, that's kind of all of us. So we don't normally have that magical path figured out the day we graduate from college or something.
Right.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to some practical steps, and I think this is where you guys really are gonna get some good takeaways from this. Okay, so the first thing we wanna talk about is leveraging your SMPS experience. So we're all here today with SMPS, and you guys really need to take advantage of this. So SMPS is an amazing organization. I mean, I know we're a little biased up here, president, past president, president in the back, but use this organization. So make sure you're attending all of the events. So my first year in SMPS, I came to 2 meetings, that's it, because they were the perfect meeting for what I was doing. And so I was like, okay, this is great, I'm gonna learn something from this, and then I'm just gonna wait around for something else that's perfect just for me. And then I realized I need to be going to everything so I can start meeting everyone else and start building those relationships. And at first, if you're marketing, you're just building relationships just to build relationships, to start getting to know other people in the industry. Who can you call if you have a question? You know, things like that. So my second year in SMPS, I went to everything because I was just like, I'm just gonna go to everything. Let's see what happens. And then I was asked to be on a committee, so I joined a committee. You don't all have to do this. I joined a committee. And
Which is how we met, actually.
Yes, and when I got on a committee, I feel like you kind of got introduced to this like inner circle. You were suddenly invited to these extra events, or, hey Lynn, did you know about this is happening and that's happening, and are you going to be here? So once you're getting involved, there's no point in paying the membership fee if you're not going to get involved. And that's what I tell people all the time. I don't care if you have memberships to 10 places, get involved in them. And then with SMPS, make sure that your staff and your leadership are understanding the importance of SMPS. So a big thing this year, except for this meeting, I typically have about 4 engineers at every meeting that I go to, because they're going to learn something from it. So that's been my goal this year, is to really get buy-in from my office. So you can take back this really great information, but if your CEO is sitting right next to you and he's like, man, that was really good, then you get even more buy-in. And you're networking. So as you're building those relationships, you're just building a really great network. It can be a fun, friendly network. It can be your professional network, however you want to start taking advantage of it.
Can I interject too?
Yes.
Really quickly? And when she talks about networking, I wanted to share with you all that I was not a natural born networker. It's a learned skill. It's a learned skill, and so the more you do it, the more comfortable you get at it. I think that there's also a myth that you just automatically know how to network effectively and that you're at ease with it, and that's not necessarily the case. So
It gets easier.
yes, it gets so much easier, and you do it enough, you actually look forward to it and enjoy it. At least not everyone. I mean, you may find out that it's not for you, and that's okay. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. So.
Okay, so then we have leverage your network. So as you're moving into this business development role, start thinking about who you already know, who you're meeting, and start asking for introductions. So a warm introduction, maybe it's via email, maybe it's a phone call, but if Lynn can introduce me to someone, that's so much better than just a cold call of me saying, hey, I would love to have lunch with you. But if Lynn can send a nice email introducing who I am, why they need to get to know me, that's just a huge step in the doors, a huge step in the right direction.
Because you've already got that trust there. Because if they trust the person that's introducing you, then you've already established that trust and you haven't had to do anything. So,
ask for face-to-face meetings. So it's one of those things where we can say hi and kind of, oh, we should catch up or something like that, but really set a face-to-face one-on-one meeting, and then you can really get to know people. And you never know who people know. So this is a really small industry. If you're new to it, you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many people I'm never gonna know, who I need to get to know. But after a little bit of time, you start seeing the same faces and you start knowing, oh, I need to talk to that person back there. And so once you're kind of in the industry for a little bit, it's much smaller than you think it is at first. And another big thing that I say is don't rule anyone out. So sometimes people are like, oh, well, I only want to talk to the principal at XYZ firm. I talk to everybody because you never know who they know. You never know when they're going to get promoted. You never know if they can give an introduction. So, when I first came on board with TLC and RLG, they said, oh, but you're just meeting with the marketing people? And as I started coaching them, I'm like, the marketing people are the right-hand man of all the principals, of all of the PMs, of all of the people putting together the material. So it's just like a different avenue and a different way of thinking than sometimes our leadership thinks about. So.
right. And when I was interviewing for my position at Fugro, and I was being very frank about where I was in my career and what experience I did have and even what experience I didn't have. And, they'll ask you, what kind of contacts do you have, in the AEC market? And I said, well, look, I know everyone in marketing in Dallas and in Fort Worth because of my experience in SMPS, and that was attractive to them. And I think a lot of times we discount something of ourselves. We just automatically discount it because it's like, well, I know the marketing people. Well, that's a big deal. And not everybody has that inside knowledge. And so whatever you do have, work it, leverage it.
When you are kind of getting to know people and scheduling these meetings, make sure to give dates as suggestions. So there's probably been a lot of times where you've been with your friends and you're like, man, we should really grab a movie sometime. And then 6 months later you go back and you're like, oh, we never did that. But if you tell your friend, hey, we should grab a movie next Thursday, then you're gonna get out your calendar, can you do this on Thursday? So make it easy. Make it easy as you're getting out and building these relationships with people. Okay, so rally support. So we'll give another plug for SMPS. SMPS has a really great mentor protege program. So if you're not involved in the mentor protege program, make sure to get signed up next year or find a mentor somewhere. So it's huge. I have been a part of the mentor protege for, is it 4 years or 5 years now?
I think it's 5 years.
I think it's 5 years too. I told Kathy I'm signing up for the next 20 years. So there's always something you can learn. In 20 years, I hope that I'm still continuing to learn and finding a mentor that can continue teaching me. So there's a lot of people within SMPS who are really happy to help. So if there's somebody that you look up to that's maybe in the business development role and you're making that transition, maybe it's somebody that you can talk to, once a month for the next 6 months or so as you're kind of seeing, what do I need to do? I've mentioned this a couple times already, make friendships. So if I had my phone in front of me, if I pulled it up, I would say half the people in my phone list are SMPS people. So they're just people that I've gotten to know for so long, and they're my friends, they're people I trust. And get involved. So there's all kinds of things that you can get involved in. It's an alphabet soup out there. So we have SMPS, AIA, AGC, there's tons of industry-focused events that you can get involved in. And the big thing that I always coach is it doesn't necessarily have to be an industry event that you're getting involved in. If you're passionate about something, get involved in that. And it just helps with kind of conversation. So Lynn, past president, I'm current president, because we both believe in SMPS so much. And we have another overlap with library. So I'm also the president of my local library board because I'm just super passionate about reading. I think everybody should have a library card. So find something like that you're passionate about. Is it a dog rescue, a cat rescue? Get involved. Cat rescues. And you never know who you're going to meet at these things. So one of my young engineers, she's about 26, we were at an event and there was a principal who they both volunteered at a cat rescue. So there was no reason for this super young engineer to have a conversation with our potential client principal, but then they had this thing in common and they're over in the corner just talking about cat rescue. Yeah. So.
Okay. So the final one, take risks. So this is the biggie, right? It's nice and safe in our bubble and in our comfort zone. But if you want to get to that next step, you have to break out of your comfort zone. Ask to take on additional responsibility. I know this is a biggie because we're all stretched so thin. I know I am currently, and I was back then too. But if you remember back to where we mapped out our transitions, where that transition period is only a year at a time, it's not a whole lot of time to ask you to go above and beyond and take on that additional responsibility. It will pay off in more ways than you can imagine. Also, take on additional responsibility, which I already said, but I used to say, see a need, fill a need, right? So if you see that something's not getting done, now you can't just run off and go doing everything that's not getting done, or you never sleep, right? You have to be strategic about what you choose to take on, and if it lines up with where you're heading, where your next step is. But that's what I did when I was at PSI. I would see that there was a clientele that wasn't really being reached, and we had a service that we could market to this clientele. And so I put myself in the middle of that and started marketing that part of what we did, and we actually started getting some proposals at the door. So, you know, and I was actually afraid to start doing that because I didn't necessarily have permission to do that, but I thought, you know, if my boss happens to be upset about this, and I'm not saying don't talk to your boss first, that's not what I'm advocating at all, but you know, the way I rationalized it was, I am trying to bring more revenue into this firm, and if he has a problem with that, then maybe I need to rethink where I'm at, right? So, but you also have to make sure that you're holding down the job that you were actually hired to do. You got to make sure that you're doing that, and you're doing it well, so simultaneously. Also, undertake risks. I have down develop relationships internally, which for me felt like a risk. But I was very intentional about making sure that I developed relationships with leadership, but not just with leadership, with like department managers. Because when it came time to go and visit these clients that no one else was going to see, I needed to take a technical expert with me. And if I had developed that relationship prior to that meeting, they are, you know, my teammate trusted me, and so they were willing to take that chance with me on a possible new relationship and new sale. So, also, and this is a biggie, revamp your LinkedIn and your resume. Go ahead and start thinking of yourself in terms of where you want to be in that new role and in that new position, and then strategically position your messaging for that new space, right? A very smart woman, Kathy Hutchinson, gave a LinkedIn talk 2-3 years ago, actually in this very room, and she talked about positioning yourself on LinkedIn where you want to be in the next 2 to 3 years, right? And so I did that, but when I did that, it felt very scary at the time to completely revamp your LinkedIn and talk about where you wanted to go instead of where you are right now. So think about when your firm is going after a project pursuit and you very carefully curate your firm experience. You also very, very carefully curate your professional engineer, architect. You go through their, or at least I do, you go through their resume and you make sure that their resume is chock full of projects that resemble and are relevant to the project that you're pursuing. You want to do the same thing for yourself, right? So the things that have brought you success up to this point, if you're a doer, right? So if you're the one, you know, making sure that these submittals are happening, or overseeing the folks that are making sure that these submittals are happening, you know, in a more managerial type position, you want to make sure that that's not what you're staking your claim on in your resume. That's the thing that's brought you to where you are now, but that's not what's going to get you to that next step if you're shifting gears. So you want to just be really careful and focused about how you do position yourself, just like you would your firm.
And I had a friend of mine look over my resume, and I had, you know, all the RFQs, the InDesign, all of that, and they said, well, do you want to do this at your next position? And I said, no. And they said, take it off. And I'm like,
Yep.
What do you mean take it off? Like,
Yep.
That's what, you know, and then you just kind of have to think things through a little bit differently, because if that's what's on the resume, that's what they're going to hire for, you know? And not that we're making things up, it's just, let's focus on the other things that we've been doing a lot of.
Right. So everything that's tied to business development, you want to latch onto those things, and you want to include those things and play up those things and show them in the best light. You don't want to talk about your marketing background and what you've been doing thus far, because it's not gonna help you. The other thing was, when I was wanting to pursue a business development manager position, right? So you want to highlight business development. You want to also highlight that you have managerial experience. Because as a business developer, you may not directly oversee people, but you're managing the business development of your firm, and so you're rallying your team, and so you're playing manager to playing. That's not the right word, but you're acting as a manager and a leader to your team, and so you want to think about, what leadership skills do I have? Well, I had leadership skills through SMPS because I was leading a volunteer board of 9 to 10 people, and so that's what I talked about. So if you don't have that experience already that you can put on your resume, get involved in SMPS, join a committee, lead a committee, and then you can start talking about that and leveraging that experience. Case studies. All right. So we want to talk about case studies, which is really, we've touched on a lot of this already, but these are more in-depth, specific cases that we did while we were at our old positions as marketing coordinators, that we did over and above our job that helped us get to where we are now. So my case study is D2 Architecture and GFF, which is a very familiar, I would assume a very familiar architecture firm if you're in DFW and AEC. So what I did was I attended an industry event, and there were several architects that were in attendance, and so I made sure that I introduced myself to them, right? So I realized my current firm wasn't selling a business line targeted to architects, which I addressed briefly already. So I realized that I could try to set up face-to-face meetings with these architects that I was already starting to have relationships with, and I could sell them this service line, right? Well, it worked. My first 2 meetings right off the bat, we actually got 2 proposals, one from each of those meetings through these other firms, and yeah, it worked.
It's all about who you know.
I mean, it seems really, really simple, and it was actually more simple than I thought it was gonna be. But if you're willing to just put yourself out there, you kind of have to set the fear factor aside, because it was definitely there. I remember the morning that we were gonna meet with GFF. It was an acquaintance. It was a warm introduction, right? And I had, through you, and I had met this person before, but we had never had that business meeting yet. And I still really hadn't I wasn't privy to the inside of what these business development meetings consist of. I really hadn't thought past setting the meeting and showing up to the meeting, right? I hadn't thought about the content of the meeting, which is very, very important. You want to have a plan, and you want to have an objective for when that meeting has concluded. And so I was able to bring a technical expert with me to that meeting who was used to selling that service line, was envelope testing, building envelope testing. And really all I had to do was make that connection, and he actually did the selling for me. But I learned so much just being there, you know, as an observationist, as like a fly on the wall, you know. I was just there to make the connection, and then was able to be part of that. And it's okay if you don't know everything right now, but try to get into those meetings, get you a seat at the table any way that you can, and just learn. Okay. Oh, and I have another one. Trinity River Authority. So my boss had decided that we were going to pursue, it was just their annual RFQ, right? And this was, I think, the 2nd or 3rd year in a row that we had submitted. We had been selected as, you know, their pool of sub-consultants for this IDIQ contract. We'd never gotten any work out of it. And and there it goes again. And nobody could tell me why we didn't get any work out of it. And the reason we didn't get any work out of it was because nobody actually knew the entity. Nobody was talking to anybody. Nobody was really making the connection. We just kept pursuing this and, you know, touting that we had won when we really didn't win anything because there were no dollars at play, right? So I talked to my leadership and we went ahead with the go decision. I said, fine, we'll go for it. You know, I was the one that put it together, but there needs to be some afterthought to this. Once we do get selected, someone needs to go visit with the entity and start getting some projects in, right? Little did I know that I was gonna be that person. Nobody else wanted to take it on, and that's okay. So we were added to the consultant pool for that year. I cold called the entity. I fumbled through my introduction on the phone, like I wasn't super smooth, you guys. But they got me a meeting anyhow, because that's what they do. They want to meet the consultants. That's part of why they're doing what they do. So I was able to set a meeting with the entity director. Before that meeting, I did a capture plan so that I was aware of what they cared about, what projects they had coming up, what their leadership looked like. And while I was doing the capture planning, I realized that a majority of their leadership was female, right? So when it came time to actually meet with the entity director, mind you, I had set up the meeting. It was assumed that I wasn't going to attend the meeting. I was gonna stay behind the scenes like I had been before and not actually attend. And I put my foot down and said, you need me at this meeting because their leadership is predominantly female. And you need to look like you have a balanced workforce. It's not all, you know, men of a certain color, right? You wanna look diversified. So they actually took my word. We received an RFP almost immediately after that meeting, and we got 2 projects right off the bat at $180,000 each, which for a sub-consultant firm, that's a pretty high fee. That was a pretty high fee for us. So those are my 2 case studies.
Okay, so and I have 2 case studies as well. So the first one is with an architectural firm in Fort Worth. And so this is when I had the marketing responsibilities, the office admin responsibilities, anything that was not engineering responsibilities. So I had all kinds of things competing all over the place. We sent several RFIs, and that was part of my job as well, to send the RFIs and submittals to the other firm. So, you know, just another little added thing on the plate. And so I had emailed the same marketing person over and over and over a handful of times, like marketing collateral, the resumes, the project sheets, things like that. And on my timeline that was up here a few slides back, that's when I was like, okay, we're missing this big important part of getting to know them. So I asked my boss, I said, can I take her to lunch and get to know her? You know, can we get some FaceTime? And he said yes. And so we were able to start building a really great relationship. And one of the things with that relationship, I was able to explain to my engineers that I know that they gave us a due date of Wednesday at noon, but let's try to get it to them on Monday, because they're compiling so much stuff. If we can get it to them earlier, then maybe we can get some brownie points with them. So then I'm sure they're probably still working together, but so that was 2 years of work that they did together, just because of, you know, good working relationship. I have another case study with OmniPlan. So I had several one-on-one meetings with an architect at that firm, and we started really developing a relationship. You know, and if I could talk, developing a relationship means more than just talking about projects. So I found out that he was renovating his house, and you know, he was acting as contractor, but that's not his job. And so I mean, you learn all of these things about somebody. He asked us to propose on a project because we started building that relationship, and he asked me to attend a kickoff meeting, which I typically do not attend. And so about 2 weeks before the meeting, he said, Andrea, will you be at the kickoff meeting? And I said, well, I don't typically go to that. It's in my engineers, but I'm happy to be there. And so about a week later, he said, hey, just double checking. You're gonna be at the kickoff meeting, right? And I said, yes, you asked me to be there, I will be there. And so the day before the meeting, he said, Andrea, you will be at the kickoff meeting, right? And I said, Randy, you do realize I am not an engineer, right? And so he kind of laughed and he said, but I want you and your team at the kickoff meeting. So that's when it kind of all wraps back around. So he hired me because he had built the relationship with me. And he knew that everything that I was selling was, it was trust. So he knew, hopefully, that my people would be able to perform. So he wanted me at that meeting with my team. And so I was able to go back and tell them, okay, he hired me, so make sure to loop me in on anything that I can help you guys out with, because obviously I am not an engineer. So that was a fun one. Okay, questions? Ooh, yeah, okay, where do we start?